Good morning again. 8:34. Happy Monday to you. Already kicking the week off. Got to keep the brains firing. The neurons.
Yes.
What are the things inside of the brain, Doc? What do I call all those things?
Well, those are neurons, and
neurons.
then you have neurotransmitters.
That's the right terms. Yeah, I
There
told
you
you,
go, you
James.
got
I
it.
knew it. I knew something.
Get this. You have more connections of those neurons in your brain than there are stars in the entire universe.
In just one brain.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Dr. Tim Royer joins us this morning of Royer Neuroscience. You can check out RoyerNeuroscience.com. Also, author extraordinaire, Extinguishing Einstein. You co-wrote this one with your missus. Is that right?
Yes. My wife, who's my business partner, she's a nurse and was working in pediatrics a lot. And together we made Royer Neuroscience. And I think we're a pretty great team.
You've studied with kids in particular for how long would you say, give or take? Not to date you or anything like that. That's not.
I started when I was 6. No, I've been doing this for over 32 years. I had a great opportunity out of graduate school to become the division chief of pediatric neuropsychology at a large children's hospital. And it was kind of like throwing me in the deep end of the pool. Had to learn a lot really, really quick. Some was really good, but then you also saw the underbelly of poor diagnosis and over medication of kids, which was, really a sad thing to see. That was in the early 90s.
Extinguishing Einstein is the name of the book. EmpowerYourEinstein.com is the website. EmpowerYourEinstein.com. So the book focuses on ADHD, misdiagnosis of children. Is that the big premise of the book?
Yeah, one of my big concerns in the 90s when I was working with all these kids at the children's hospital is some of these kids would get over-medicated, end up on the ICU. And we'd go in and we'd assess them, and they had a diagnosis for a couple years of ADHD. We'd assess them and find out they don't even have ADHD. It's something else. So we did a study of 1,000 kids with a diagnosis of ADHD, and only a third of them actually had the disorder. They had something else going on, like a sleep problem or anxiety or depression or a learning disability. So that really started me on a mission in the early 2000s, like to help people understand, don't just look at behaviors. You must look at the brain. You have to understand the brain before you start putting chemicals and affect those neurons you talked about.
So ADHD as a diagnosis, then, does that mean it's got a pretty low threshold to be considered ADHD? Is that why so many kids are diagnosed, would you say?
Yeah, well, it's very, very interesting. In the early 90s, it was 1 out of 40 kids in the United States was diagnosed with ADHD. Then 2000s, 1 in 20. Then it became 1 in 10. And now it's 1 in 9. So anything that would grow that fast, we would call that an epidemic. But I would say that it's an epidemic of overdiagnosis. We're all different. Everybody's different. Right here at this table, we're all different. And just because I exhibit a certain behavior doesn't mean that it's always that disorder. And it can be. I'm not opposed to that. It's just you have to look at the brain. And most diagnoses are done in about 10 minutes, and you're walking out with a script. And I would challenge you to say, did anybody look at your child's brain, which is their greatest asset, before you ever started to medicate the brain?
Is part of it, because you were also sharing a story about and you didn't name obviously anybody, but a concept of, okay, if you give kids Legos, let's say, for example, maybe they don't run around all around the walls and jump and act like they ate a bunch of sugar. They actually can process and do things. So whose fault is it, I guess, is what I want to get to here. Is it a parent issue? Is it a doctor issue? Is it a kid issue? Like, who's to blame in this whole equation, would you say?
Well, I would say that nobody's purposely trying to do anything to hurt children, right? But in our process of creating like an assembly line, we kind of date mark kids. Here's your date, and this is when you should read, and this is when you should do these things. That starts to create a little bit of anxiety when my kid's a little different, and he's not hitting all those marks, or she's not hitting on their marks. And that deviation, rather than celebrate that and say, could this be the next Monet? Could this be the next Michael Jordan? Could this be Einstein? That difference, that deviation, all of a sudden starts to create fear in everybody. And then we start to immediately diagnose and put them in a big bucket. And then we start to make a decision to medicate. And we need to look at those deviations as something that could be absolutely wonderful if curated correctly, right? So it's time. It's more this uh, focusing on getting things done quick and this assembly line process versus, it's a unique thing. Every brain, they're not. No, there's no brain. There will never be a brain like yours.
Heck no, there won't be.
Ever.
Nah.
Beginning of time till the end of time. And just because you're sleepy today doesn't mean I need to put you on Ambien. Maybe I need to figure out why you're not sleeping. It's not that difficult to just chemically alter something, but it is difficult and it takes time to look at the brain and why it's not focusing. And that's what we need to be doing.
It's much easier for me just to look at the nerd cluster that looks like a brain and just eat it, and then that adjusts my brain, and that changes it up. Do our brains ever stop developing in life? Or
They're always continuing to grow, but there are times when they're a little bit more workable or moldable. And early on is pretty incredible what the brain. I mean, you're probably going to learn the most complex thing, which is language. Before you're 3 years old, right? So you can kind of rest today, because you've done the most complex things you're ever going to do in your lifetime in the first few years of life. But it's always, always learning. And in Einstein, it's celebrating that. And so we're actually giving away 100 free copies.
Ooh,
well, come on. I wouldn't come here without a giveaway. Let's go.
Let's do it.
100 free copies. You got to go to Empower Your Einstein and go to free book. And the first 100 people that go there get a free copy. Free. I'm talking free.
Wow.
And this is like real science. You're not doing that made up science stuff. You're doing the real science.
This is
in this
real
book.
stuff.
We're not
Yeah.
selling snake oil. This is
No.
real stuff.
No, and if they read the book, the 100
Whoa,
people.
wait now.
Well,
No,
come
slow
on.
down.
what's
Drum roll. Let's go.
Uh-oh.
If they read the book, they get 50% off an assessment of their child's brain.
Wow.
No.
I
So-
think this is the first time I've heard, too, that you can assess the brain to diagnose with ADHD. I always thought it was just kind of a clinical, you go to see your family doctor, you kind of tell them what's going on. And
Like the Rorschach test. Like, what do you see on this page?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, we're stuck in what I call a kind of a two-dimensional way of seeing. Is we just look at behaviors, high or low, right? And we check these behaviors, but we don't look at the source, which is the brain and the electrical activity. And what I'd like to do next time in here is I'd like to hook up one of you guys.
All right.
And we look at the electrical activity, because when we look at the electrical activity, it shows us why the brain isn't sleeping, why it's not focusing, why it's anxious. And then we have a perfect GPS to get us to the location that we need to get to.
So you've been working on this and studying this for a long time. Something new, obviously, that's come out in recent days, AI and technology.
Yeah.
Does all of that change any of this or make you want to go back and explore certain things related to your studies, if at all?
I think AI is a fantastic thing, but just like in everything, there's balance. And sometimes that can keep us away from doing some things that we need to do. It's important that we learn, but sometimes it's more important to ask the right questions. And that's what AI, if you're using it correctly, will make you do, is it'll make you ask the right questions. So I'm not opposed to that. I do think that we sometimes undervalue the importance of relationships, and relationships are like air, like we need them to survive. And anything that kind of distracts us from that, I want to be careful with that when kids are developing, and even as adults, is how do we develop those? And ultimately, how is the brain responding? So if the brain is becoming more anxious by looking at the EEG, I can see that when it's overusing AI or overusing social media, then I want to rebalance that. But it's not just guesswork. Most people are dealing with the most precious thing in the universe, the human brain, like it's a dartboard. And they're just throwing darts, hoping they hit this right thing. And then, hey, is he a little bit better? Yeah, I think he's a little bit better. Or a little bit worse. Let's put him on double of that because he's a little bit worse. What are you using to measure that? Just a checklist? I could come up with 10 different reasons today why I might feel a certain way based on travel or sleep or whatever. I need to look at the brain. Like yesterday, I sat down when I came back from a trip and I put on my EEG and I said, Doc, you need to sleep a little bit more because I could see on my EEG that I needed more sleep.
Yeah.
Dr. Tim Royer of Royer Neuroscience. EmpowerYourEinstein.com. That's the website. You want to click free book. First 100 users to go for the free book, get it for free.
There you
It's
go.
only
Yes, they do.
100.
Only 100 in
Only
August.
100. Go fast,
in August,
guys.
let's go.
Fast.
EmpowerYourEinstein.com.